Hey guys, what is up? Nihat here with Film Comics Explained, and we are back for the second chapter of Predator: Concrete Jungle. When we had left, a predator had been wreaking havoc on the citizens of New York, killing street criminals and white-collar criminals who were also armed to the teeth. Schaefer and his partner Raish have been trying to investigate the crime scenes, but every attempt has been blocked by their captain, who tells them to leave on sight. Just as the captain was ordering his men to forcibly escort them out of the station, a general appears beside them, insisting that wouldn't be a good idea if Schaefer was anything like his brother Dutch. He then asks Schaefer to follow him. We return to find the two detectives sitting in a bar with the general, who was drinking whiskey. He explains that Dutch had saved his ass a number of times, and tells them that he is a good man. He insists that this meeting was off the record, before saying that he owed him this much for Dutch, before telling Schaefer to drop this one and back away. Phillips gets up, and Schaefer tells him that the killers were somehow connected to Dutch. He then asks him who the hell they are. Phillips tells him that they like heat and the sport of killing. He then says that they will be gone in 2 to 3 weeks, insisting that he should leave them be. He walks out and tells him that if you mess with them, only God knows what will happen. The two cops are driving through the streets as Raish asks his partner what kind of work his brother was involved in. Schaefer tells him that Dutch was in covert operations, also informing him that the last thing he had heard was that he was leading a squad into Central America before going missing. They arrive back at the first crime scene. Raish tells him that McComb's forensics people had already gone over the place with tweezers. Schaefer tells him that McComb's men couldn't find their asses with both hands in their back pockets, before kicking the door and breaking the lock and chains. God damn. He tells Raish that whoever is doing the killings has messed with the city, his subway systems, and maybe even his younger brother, before saying, I want them. He tells Raish to stay outside and shoot anybody that comes in. Schaefer bursts through the barricaded door and looks through a hole that the Predator's laser cannon had made. He mentions that he is able to feel a prickly feeling like something brushing the hairs on the back of his neck. We then see the silhouette of the Predator behind him. Schaefer reaches for his gun and tells it that he figured it would come. The Predator punches his face, knocking the gun out of his hand in the process. We then see the enormous Predator standing over Schaefer, who tells it that that was a lucky punch. Schaefer is one big dude, bigger than Dutch by the looks of it here, and the Predator looks to be twice his size. Schaefer defensively kicks it, but we see the Predator grabbing his foot and swinging him into the wall. Schaefer's head is spinning as he calls the Predator an asshole. We then see it attach a device to his neck. Schaefer gets up and asks what the hell it just did to him as he grabs a plank of wood and smacks it across the face, causing its helmet to fall off. The Predator then says, let's give him some candy, imitating what the gang had said to it earlier. The Predator then kicks Schaefer through the window and we see him begin to plummet with the Predator's helmet. Raish can be seen on the street, who is alarmed to see his partner being hurled out of the window. We get a narration from Raish, who tells us that the cops in New York tend to get used to things, like the time someone had live wire tied a cow to the chairman of Federal Beef and pitched them both off the top of the building in protest against chemically treated meat. We see the events play out as before, as he tells us that that is a job that you learn to deal with. We then get another angle of Schaefer being kicked out of the window, as Raish tells us getting the crap kicked out of you and being pitched off the 5th floor was something else. Raish yells out, Schaefer, as we see him falling. Schaefer is talking to himself, trying to get a grip on what is happening. He says, nose broken, can't see, falling, Christ, before telling himself to forget about the Predator and focus on his survival. He grabs onto some of the clotheslines stretched between the buildings, which snap due to the force. He then miraculously breaks most of his fall with a more sturdy rope that holds on for a little while longer before snapping itself. We see him hit the trash with a large thud and see Raish run off after him. He asks if he is alright, and Schaefer tells him that he is just dandy. He tells his partner that he had slipped and that this was an accident, before telling him that he stole the son of a bitch's hat. We see the ambulance taking him to the hospital, as Raish informs us that even McComb would have trouble believing Schaefer slipped out of the window, but he recognized that look in his eyes. Something big was up, and he needs to deal with it alone. Raish is walking through the hospital and tells us that he hates them, as they have the smell of death mixed with linoleum. A doctor yells out to him and says that he had read his preliminary reports that indicated Schaefer had slipped, before saying he hadn't seen an explanation that lame since the 3rd grade. He grabs his arm and insists that he doesn't care what he tells his superiors, but he himself wants answers. Raish tries to brush it off, saying that the big guy is banged up, but will be as good as new with some rest. He also jokes, saying that he knows Schaefer carries liability insurance in case cars run into him. The doctor tells him to cut the crap and insists that you don't get something like the device on his neck stuck to you from falling from a building. We return to Raish, who is at home and pouring himself some bourbon. He tells us that he had never seen his partner beat up like this and is struggling to understand what happened to him and what Phillips had meant earlier when he said that they liked the heat and the sport. His kids were asleep and his wife was in the living room by the front door. A chill runs down his spine before he says that maybe his family wasn't safe in New York. His wife walks in asking if he had said something as someone begins to pound on the front door. Raish tells his wife to run upstairs with the kids as he reaches for his gun. He cautiously opens the door to find Schaefer standing in his hospital gown, being held up by a stranger. After a few hours, we find Schaefer is laying on the couch. The two kids lean around the corner to see their mother offering him some tea. Schaefer thanks her and tells Raish that he's gonna find the son of a bitch and kick his ugly ass from there to New Jersey. One of the boys tells his younger brother to look at all the blood and how cool it was. Raish tells him to go to bed, before asking what that thing was on his neck. Schaefer says that he doesn't think it was there to kill him, at least not yet. He then suggests that he's been tagged. Literally, the next day, we see Raish driving them to the precinct. Schaefer insists that they backtrack Phillips and find him, as he was hiding something about Dutch. His partner tells him that he has a feeling they're going to be canned if they don't bring McComb in on this. He then takes a moment to tell Schaefer that he hasn't pushed because he figured he had his reasons, but tells him that he has to know what they're up against. Schaefer tells him that he doesn't really know yet. They head inside to find the captain yelling at them with the classic, "I've got the chief crawling up my ass," as his detectives had entered a government-sealed crime scene. He yells at Schaefer to get into his office. McComb tells Schaefer that he is going to make it simple. If he keeps messing with him, he will have his job, and then have him up on charges. Schaefer ignores him and tells him that he wants to talk to Phillips and confirm something. McComb then reaches for his phone and says that he isn't listening. He tells him that Phillips doesn't exist and that Schaefer was now history. He calls the reception and asks for the desk sergeant. We then see a giant fist slam down onto the phone, shattering it, as Schaefer says he has a bad connection. He throws the captain into his bookshelf. The captain is terrified here as he insists that he is being honest when he says that he will never find Phillips. He informs him that Phillips is some kind of secret army freelancer and that he wouldn't tell him what was going on. Schaefer calls him a wise man before dropping the captain and exiting the office. We arrive at the airport and hear Raish off panel saying, "South America, are you out of your mind?" Schaefer tells him that the last phone call Dutch had left him informed him that there was some kind of rescue mission on the Colombian border. Something happened down there that ties all of this together. Schaefer then tells him to get his wife Shari and his kids away from New York. He has a bad feeling that something ugly is about to go down. After a day, we arrive at a bar in Riucho, Colombia, to find Schaefer sitting down pouring salt onto his hand. The bartender asks if he would like another beer, and Schaefer tells him that he would, before warning him not to spit into it this time. A man then comes in and approaches his table. He tells him that he understands that he is looking for a guide. He sits down and tells him that he has heard he is an American policeman who has many enemies among the Medellin cartel. Schaefer asks him if he has a problem with that, and the man says no, insisting that it means he charges more. Schaefer then informs him that he is looking for Americans who disappeared over the border 3 years back, and something else that comes with the heat. The guy tells him that he is a mad American, before saying that meant he gets to charge even more. His guide told him that he used to work recon for the US military, but Schaefer assures us he doesn't trust him or anyone in this hellhole. After 4 days of travel, they reach the remnants of an abandoned guerrilla camp. He tells Schaefer that there has been so much fighting here, and that there were essentially no winners. Schaefer investigates the scene, and tells us that it smelled like one of Dutch's operations. Day 5, and the jungle started changing. The guide asks him if he can feel it. He tells him that he said he was looking for a thing that comes in the heat, before informing him that this was the spot the natives had said the sun appeared at midnight. They stumble upon the huge crater left by the Predator that detonated a bomb to self-destruct in the hopes of killing Dutch along with it. Schaefer looks at the site and asks what the hell happened here. And that is the end of the second chapter to Predator: Concrete Jungle. As always, I'm curious to hear your thoughts and opinions on this one in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like and to subscribe to stay up to date on all my content. Alright guys, stay awesome. I'm Niat with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.